Hey, you're about to listen to an older episode of the Volunteer Youth Worker podcast. This is a podcast that Sid Coop, Jason Ballard, and myself, Jeremy McDonald, started back in 2018 to answer the practical questions that you're asking in your youth ministry. But lots has changed since we started it in 2018. We've changed the name. We're doing new and different events and lots of other things. The thing that hasn't changed, though, is the content you're about to listen to, we think is still really valuable. But if you notice that some of the things we're talking about are obviously a little bit older, that is okay. You can always head to youthworker.community to stay up to date with what's happening currently right now here in 2024, and you can track along with us there. We'd love to see you. But enjoy this episode. Episode 109 of the Youth Ministry Team podcast. Welcome back. This is Jeremy hosting just the intro of today's conversation with Sid Coop. How you doing, Sid?
Yeah, real good, Jared. Great to be here with you, bro.
Yeah, and the fun part is that once we get into the content for today, it's actually neither of us are going to be a part of the conversation. Instead, we've got three brilliant youth workers that are a part of our community sharing with everybody today.
Yeah, and you know what's really cool about it, Jared, is like basically they're doing a podcast takeover for us, and they're great, and they're from right across the country. And they've been in the game. They are currently in the game. They're wrestling through the pandemic on how to do, faithful youth ministry in the space that we're in. And Jared, both you and I over the last little while have been talking a lot about evangelism and the need for us to continue to lean into evangelism. And they're just sharing some real practical ways that we can continue to encourage our students to move into evangelism with their peers. And I love the conversation. Super thankful for it.
Yeah. How do you help Gen Z tell a better story, the best story of all? And so we're so grateful that you are here listening. We honestly believe that the time you're going to spend today is going to be helpful for you in your ministry, whether or not you're a point leader and you're running and in charge of something, or more specifically, honestly, we target all of these conversations at volunteers. So if you're a frontline volunteer, this isn't your profession by any stretch, but you take time out of your busy week to invest in the faith of this next generation. We just think, honestly, you're the absolute best. You're making an eternal difference. And the time you take today is going to make your role, make the things that you do in your role a little bit even sharper. So we're really looking forward to it. Now, Sid, I did want to say before we get into this conversation, we also have lots of ways to connect with our community. So we're the youth worker community, as people kind of know, and there are lots of youth workers across our country and well beyond that we would consider a part of the community. These three that they'll hear from today are certainly a part of the community, but specifically this fall, we've got another way for people to take a step into what we're up to with our coalition. Do you want to fill them in on what that's about?
Yeah, Jared, so excited about the coalition. The coalition is like an affordable, accessible, mentored way to get your youth ministry education, both at an undergraduate level or as a graduate level program. So we're really excited about that. And again, Jared, what's really pumped is we have a campus here in Kelowna where you just come 4 times a week. Otherwise, you're in your local ministry context.
Four times a year.
Sorry about that. Thank you. Not 4 times a week, 4 times a year.
Although Kelowna is great to be 4 times a week. There's nothing wrong with Kelowna, British Columbia.
Who doesn't want to be? Yeah, exactly. So 4 times a year, you come for 1 week modulars. And our profs, of course, are various profs who are experts in the fields that we're talking with. So it's really fun to get those diverse voices that are helping us think about youth ministry in deeper ways. And then, Jer, you're in your local context doing ministry. You have a ministry coach. You have someone who's doing spiritual formation along with you as well in that context. And you get to work in a cohort. You're part of the youth worker community with other youth workers from across the country that are doing the same studying that you are. The other thing, by the way, Jer, that I love so much, and I think this is so cool, is it's truly an affordable and accessible way to get your education, but have a rigorous education at the same time. And then finally, the part that I'm really excited about, man, is that we're launching a new satellite campus in Atlantic Canada. So if you're from Atlantic Canada, you don't have to fly all the way across the country. Again, affordable and accessible for people in Atlantic Canada. So you want to get on the website and check that out. And then, Jer, I think we can say it hot off the press, we're right now exploring launching another campus in Ontario, possibly for this fall. How crazy would that be? So, if you're interested in simply exploring it, you need to get to our website, youthworker.community. You need to click on the coalition. And then please fill out the quick little form there so we can get a hold of you and give you any information that you may need to consider making a decision that literally can change your youth ministry career for the rest of your lives. And then through that, of course, make an eternal difference in the lives of the kids that we care so much about. So really excited about this, Jared, and excited about where God's leading us.
Yeah. And so there's somebody listening. It's going to be all you. You've got to take this step. We would love to have that conversation with you, and certainly excited to not just have the coalition in these places, but maybe in the future in lots of others. And so if you're in different parts of the world and you'd like to find a way to get some great vocational training in youth ministry, an apprenticeship based education, it's a little bit different than most places. Be sure, reach out to us, and we'd love to entertain that possibility of bringing the coalition somewhere else as well. But for today, I think we got to jump into this conversation with our three leaders that we're so stoked that you get a chance to hear from: Peter, Hannah, and Deniel.
Welcome to the Youth Ministry Team Podcast. Youth ministries rise and fall on the team of volunteers. So this podcast is for the whole team. Join the conversation as we tackle the practical questions you're asking so you can be encouraged and equipped as you head into your role in your youth ministry this week.
Hey, Youth Ministry Team Podcast listeners, thanks for tuning in to this episode. Before we get into today's conversation at hand, we'd love to introduce ourselves so you have a bit of an idea of who it is that you're listening to for the next few minutes. My name is Peter. I am the next gen pastor at a local church out in Langley, British Columbia on the west coast of Canada. I've been in this position for just about 7 years now, but I also grew up at this youth ministry at this local church. So it's been a while since I've been around this context, and I primarily get to work with our middle school and high school students, as well as with our young adults.
What's up, everyone? My name is Deniel Sewell. I live in Barrie, Ontario, which is, it should be the capital of Canada because the best spot you should ever be. But I lead student ministry over at Connexus Church. I actually just jumped into this role mid-COVID, so I oversee both junior high and senior high.
Hey everyone, my name's Hannah Bartlett. I'm in Charlottetown, Prince Edward Island, so all the way on the other side on the East Coast. And I'm the Next Generation's pastor at Cornerstone Baptist Church. And I've been at that church in a part-time capacity for the past 2 years, then a full-time capacity this year. So really love working with the kids, youth, and young adults there.
Amazing. I just realized that we actually represent from coast to coast.
We do.
That's beautiful. And then no one agrees with you that Barrie should be the capital.
No, I said Ontario. Ontario should be.
Oh, that is a classic Ontario thing to say.
It is.
The only beef that I have with Ontario people are that they think they're the center of the universe. It's the only province that tries to be American, but then also tries to be Canadian by not admitting that they're trying to be American. And the only city that fully embraces it is Toronto. It's why you can like Toronto. You can stomach Toronto. But Barrie, I don't know.
I love
you
it.
might be the only good
thing. When people say Barrie. Ontario, they say Toronto first. So that's what I like it. That's funny.
I love it. Well, I'm here with, again, my two good friends. And we're having a conversation today about how to help Gen Z tell a better story, or tell the better story. And really this conversation is rooted around the theme of evangelism, about sharing our faith with others and helping equip our students to do the same. And kind of in this thread of conversation, Hannah and Deniel and myself, we've kind of come up with 3 talking points that we feel like is important for us as youth leaders to be able to walk our students through and to have confidence that they're well equipped in all 3 of these areas. So these talking points you'll recognize, but I'll lay it out for you guys so you have a bit of an understanding about what it is that we're going through, and so that you can feel like you're in the loop of our conversation. The first talking point is, do our students know how to tell the story of Jesus? And this is a really simple and clear one. We feel that one of the most important things that perhaps is lacking is the ability to equip our students with not just the knowledge, but also the confidence to be able to tell the gospel in a clear and succinct way that's actually helpful and contextualized to their friends and their peers. The second talking point is, how do we help our students tell their own story? And this is the intersection of Jesus' story and their story. The moment where they met Christ, yes, the conversion story, but beyond that, the ability to articulate God's impact on their lives as they walk with Christ. So often we talk about this idea of walking with Jesus, a personal relationship with him, and yet our students would struggle to articulate what it is and how it is that God is impacting their lives. And the third and last kind of talking point in this conversation will be, what are the mediums or the platforms we can be encouraging our students to share the story of Jesus or tell the better story of Jesus, as well as tell their own. And really, as we've kind of prepped this conversation, both in our hearts, our minds, and on this beautiful Google Doc that Hannah's been working on for us, the conversation that's really deeply been fabricated in, or the core driving conviction, is we live in a world of narratives. We live in a world of storytelling. And that's not necessarily new, but in a world that's fascinated around narratives and storytelling, we truly believe that we can tell the best story or the best life, the best opportunity, the best version of life and life to the fullest through the person of Jesus. And in this conversation of evangelism, we just feel like these three talking points are a core one when it comes to equipping our students in sharing their faith with their friends. So we'll start with the first talking point. Do our students, or do Gen Z, know how to tell the story of Jesus? And as a youth pastor and as a youth leader who's been involved in youth ministry for so many years, I feel like this is one, and Deniel and Hannah, maybe you agree, maybe you don't, where it's so easy to assume that our students who follow Jesus, who would say they're Christians, it'd be easy to assume that they know how to do this. Maybe they do in theory, but perhaps they've never done it in practice. Deniel, what are some of the things that you are doing, perhaps actively in your youth ministry, or things that you're thinking through, helping your leaders think through, that is helping your kids, your students, tell the story of Jesus?
Yeah, I would say one thing that we're working through right now, and I'm encouraging my volunteers to do with their students, is ask questions, constantly asking the students, hey, what about the gospel, about what Jesus is doing in their life, really allowing them to put it into their own words. Because so often it's so easy for us to, as youth pastors from the front, to tell them what they should say, and for them to maybe regurgitate that when they're put on the spot. But how are they actually going to talk to their friends on a day-to-day? They need to be able to actually put it into their own words and be able to talk about it for themselves and understand it too. So that's one thing we're working through. It's just, hey, asking leaders to ask their students about the gospel, about Jesus, what Jesus is doing in their life.
Right. And have you ever done anything in your youth group, or perhaps equipped your youth leaders in around the idea or the basic tenets or doctrines of the Christian faith? I just think one of the things perhaps keeping our students back or providing fear into the conversation is their inability or perhaps their lack of confidence around some of the basic doctrinal tenets of the Christian faith. Are there things that you're doing to teach your students or help equip your leaders to teach your students about this kind of basic tenets of Christian faith?
I love that question. Yeah. So, as I said in the beginning, I just hopped on into this role mid-COVID. But prior to me, the student ministry director really used Alpha every single year to really drive that home. It was definitely something. Alpha does a fantastic job at putting, at using the conversation and putting it into students' words, so that they can really be able to talk about it more with their friends. So we used to use Alpha almost every single year, and then we're also partners with Orange. So we use Orange curriculum in everything we do, from our preschool all the way to high school. And they do also a fantastic job at giving us resources and giving leaders resources on how they can help students talk more about the gospel. So that's what we use here.
I love it. And so if you're listening, and we're assuming that the person listening, the average listener, is a youth leader, whether it be in a volunteer position or paid on staff, really the challenge around this main talking point is an encouragement to walk your students through how to tell the better story of Jesus, or the gospel story, in a clear way, not to assume that they already know how to, but to actually approach the conversation in a pragmatic sense, in a practical sense, in a doctrinal sense, and to be able to walk them through it. And I know, Hannah, you have actually kind of toyed around with some resources that actually help students to be able to tell the story of Jesus well. I know that there's been tons of different resources in the past, and perhaps Something a bit more outdated in today's world would be like passing out just a Bible tract or whatever it might be. I feel like perhaps that method was more effective or efficient or well received historically than it is currently. But what are some resources that you're seeing around you that are really helpful to students today when it comes to telling the story of Jesus better?
Yeah, and I love how we're talking about Alpha because I think that one of the greatest resources and one of the greatest tools that we have to give our students is just the power of leveraging relationships. So as we think about evangelism and we talk to our students about evangelism and sharing who Jesus is, I feel like there might be a fear there that they conjure up in their mind, this idea of, oh, I have to tell my friends everything doctrinally or everything about the Bible, and I don't know how to explain it all. When really what we're talking about here is kind of playing the long game, building relationships, and in telling the story of who Jesus is, we're kind of introducing their friends to a person, not to like a set of things that they have to memorize and get out there all in like 5 minutes of talking to their friends, right? So I think one of the best tools that we can give our students is just the different perspectives on kind of, I think about the gospel. A mentor told this to me recently as a diamond that is multifaceted. So depending on where you're shining the light on it, there are different parts of it that get highlighted. So to train our students to say, when you're talking to your friends about what the gospel is, it's a story about something that was lost that got found. Or it's a story about something that's broken, that became whole again. It's a story about something that was tarnished, that's cleaned up again, right? So, and we see Jesus doing this all the time in the New Testament, kind of using images like that. And in being able to kind of share their story to know, and I love that about Alpha, that it's over weeks, right? That they don't have to tell their friends in like 2 minutes or less the entire gospel, although it's really good to know how to do that. To play that long game, I think, is one of the best tools that we have, just teaching them to leverage those relationships.
I love that. I love both the idea of play the long game. You know, like most of the best evangelism happens in a relational context in a long-term way, right? Like even the friends that we would know that came to Christ, that's a journey for most people, even before the decision or the conversion moment or whatever it might be. And then I love the diamond illustration. The talking point around helping our students tell the story of Jesus is not that they would become like, in a month or in a season, the greatest Bible teachers in the world. There could be a journey of that, but the idea of the diamond helps really illustrate that there's so much depth and angle and perspective to the story of Jesus. But it really points to this idea of us needing Christ, and what it is that he did. And so, really our encouragement to you, and hopefully what it is that you hear more importantly than anything else, is the importance of being able to actually equip our students to tell the story of Jesus. And do this through examples, do this through your own life. When I look at the life and ministry of Jesus on earth, I think about how so much of his like kind of discipleship evangelism model was like, come and see what I do, then go and do what I did, then coming back and let's debrief what it is that you did. And so maybe follow that similar structure in your life. Like tell them or bring them into what it is that you do when you share your own faith. Encourage them to do the same. And they're probably gonna, face whether it be rejection, oppression, or questions that they don't have answers to. So many of my students come up to me and say, what if they ask me a question that I don't have the answer to? The point isn't to be the best apologetic in that moment. The point is to actually disciple them through a journey of being able to relationally be there for their friends and tell the story of Jesus in a clear way. So that's our first talking point around this beautiful conversation that we're having around how to tell or how to help Gen Z tell the better story. The second talking point that I want to move into is how do we help students tell their own story? And again, this is kind of the intersection between Jesus's story and our lives, the kingdom meeting our lives, and how do we help our students to do this? I feel like traditionally, most people get this experience when they sign up to go on their first short-term mission trip or whatever it might be. And I think traditionally, again, we think about it through the conversion lens, and I think that's important. But how do we help students also tell the story of Jesus' impact on their lives? Hannah, what are some things that you're doing to help equip your students in this way?
Yeah, so something that we are really intentional about here in this ministry is making sure that when students have moments where they encounter God or God does something in their lives, that they're sharing that story. And this is something that's really easy to do in your own ministry setting. Before students maybe can share their story of how God has worked in their life with people, their friends who maybe don't believe, it's a great safe space within your own ministry context to get them sharing their stories. And it doesn't have to be maybe like an Emmaus Road conversion story, but even I know we had recently a student who was waiting to have a surgery scheduled and it was going to be months. And then suddenly her surgery was moved up to like a couple weeks from now. And I said, hey, do you want to come up and share that story? Because we were praying about this and that was God at work in your life. And I honestly didn't know if she would or not, but she got up in front of our group. She shared that story. Everyone kind of applauded, celebrated. And it's like, hey, you're sharing the story of how God is at work in your life. And we get our leaders to do this too, but we really try and make that just part of our culture, is to constantly be having those connections be made between where God's story is intersecting with our own.
I love that. I love it because I think what Hannah's doing is intentionally normalizing celebrating what God is doing.
Yes.
Right? And I this is one of the saddest things that you can hear in just church ministry, is like when people get this idea of comparing their own story with someone else's. And it's like, oh, I don't really have a great testimony. I'm like, what? I grew up in a great family, Christian parents, kind of been a follower of Jesus my whole life, go to a Christian school. I'm like, wait, there's no version of that that's not beautiful. There's no version of anybody coming to Christ that's not miraculous. The story of Jesus and the cross is incredibly beautiful, incredibly miraculous. And this is why we transition from the first talking point, is that if our students can actually articulate Jesus' story and the gospel, that translates to everyone's story being involved in Christ more beautiful and more miraculous, and all the more greater and more important to share. So I love that you do that, Hannah. And I think if you're a youth leader listening, that's something that you can continue to model. What about for you, Deniel? What are some of the things that you guys are doing or you're encouraging your leaders to do in terms of modeling, creating space for students to kind of share what it is that God's doing in their lives?
Yeah, I love the word you said, modeling, because that's what we're doing. We're encouraging leaders to model what it looks like to share their story. If that's going to be on our youth night and on small groups talking about what God did in their lives during that week. We so often we see this where when you're younger, you want to try to become a little older. You try to, if you're in your teens, you look at people in their 20s, be like, oh, they're so cool, they're awesome, I want to be like them. And that's the same thing with students and small group leaders. Like, students love to see what their small group was happening in small group lives. They want to dive deeper, they want to learn more. And if we're talking about all the good stuff that's happening in our lives, and I say our lives because even though I'm a student ministry director, I'm still a youth leader. I still lead youth along with you guys, arm in arm. And I'd say as we're sharing what God's doing in our lives, it not only gives students language to know how to incorporate Jesus and the gospel in our everyday, but also says, like, you know what, you're not alone. We're in this together. What you're experiencing, I'm experiencing also, and I've been where you're standing right now. So I'd say, yeah, modeling as a youth leader and what it looks like to talk about Jesus on the everyday. The other day, actually, story time. Story time. There was I was driving. I was driving and I was on the phone with a student. And I saw the beautiful sunset and I was like, oh man, like, wow, like God made such a beautiful sunset. But automatically at first I stuttered. So I was like, oh, what a beautiful sunset. But I was like, wait, hold up, God did that. Like, I should be able to say God made that beautiful sunset. And what it looks like to actually just put Jesus and God and just put spirituality back into our everyday language, to normalize it, to make it a part of our culture. So that's one way I think we can encourage leaders and ourselves to do that, so we can show students what it means to share our story and what God is doing in our lives. I
love that. I love the idea of language too. And I think it's important. I think our job as youth leaders, or one of our jobs, is to actually help connect the dots for students. And what you said is, when we look at the beauty around us, to be able to connect that to God's great power and goodness and beauty. And, but then also, like what Hannah said, to be able to connect the dots, and like maybe for a student, like even an answered prayer request, it doesn't click immediately, right? Like that happens sometimes, especially with prayer requests that are long or extended, or perhaps to a student feels like, trivial and non-meaningful. It's like it's our job, our responsibility to be able to highlight God, and not in a way of exaggeration, but actually highlighting God in our lives. That's really the point of this talking point, is how do we continue to highlight God in our lives? How do we continue to do that with our language? And I feel like one thing that we need to get better at is asking students better questions behind their experiences with God. For example, if we went to a summer camp or a retreat or a conference with our group, a lot of students would come out of a weekend like that and be able to articulate a story that sounds something like this. I went to camp, or I went to, this conference, and perhaps, they're going through a lot in their family lives, and they said, oh man, when I was in worship, or when that speaker was talking at the end, I just felt overwhelmed, or I was emotional, and I felt God's peace. Maybe we would hear stories like that, and I think that would be common. And I'm not undermining how effective and beautiful that story is, but being able to help them connect the dots to that experience, to God's character, his nature, and again, the kingdom, I think is our responsibility. So to be able to go, okay, from that experience, what did you learn about who God is? When I felt God's peace, I felt like he was trying to tell me that I was loved and valued, and that God is faithful, and that God is the Prince of Peace, because those things are eternally true because they're about God's character. And to be able to help students articulate their experience with God in a way that points to God's character, I think actually empowers them to tell their non-Christian friends about those experiences. Because when you're saying things like, oh, I had a great moment at, this retreat, I felt God and I felt so overwhelmed. To a Christian, you're able to translate that in your mind, but to a non-Christian, that just sounds kind of funny and like hypothetical and ethereal. But to be able to go, man, at the retreat, if a 16-year-old, a 13-year-old teenager can say, I was just reminded about how faithful God is, about how God calls me his child, about how even though my life feels like it's falling apart, God holds my heart in his hands. That's a beautiful way to be able to articulate that. How do they get there? It's a maturity discipleship journey. And I think it's about, as leaders, helping students, again, highlight God in their own lives. And so again, the thread that we're going through today is around the conversation of evangelism in helping Gen Z tell the better story is, how do we help them tell the better story of Jesus? Number two, how can we help them highlight God in their own stories? And lastly, what mediums should we be encouraging our students to use, or what platforms to be able to, storytell or tell the better story of Christ and their impact, and his impact on their lives? And this can be a multitude of things, but we feel like there's really three avenues we really want to go down, and we're not saying this is an exhaustive list of three. I don't think there's any such thing as a exhaustive list that's just three, but we really want to talk through these three avenues, and these three avenues are just interpersonal social circles and relationships. So these are classroom, mates, peers, friends, teammates, family, all of that. The second is social media, and I think that's a big conversation that most of us are trying to engage in some shape, some way, shape, or form. And the third is in service opportunities, or the way that we live our lives modeling Christ's compassion and mission. And I'll share a little bit about the in-person thing, then I'll throw it to Deniel. I think the hardest people to share Christ with in a lot of ways are those closest to us. Family members, friends that don't know Jesus. And in a lot of ways, it's incredibly vulnerable. I think that's why it's so difficult, right? It's telling people that know perhaps with the greatest depth and understanding our insecurities and our mistakes and weaknesses about the story of God and his redemptive work in our lives. But I think the ability to help students face that is probably the greatest hurdle. I think as youth leaders, all of us would say we would rather see a student walk their uncle who doesn't know Jesus to Jesus in 2 years than share our youth ministry post every week on social media for the rest of their lives, but not be able to have that conversation with their uncle or whatever it might be. And so our encouragement here is, be involved in their lives. The only way we can actually walk students through this is to actually know their lives, is to know that they have an uncle that doesn't know Jesus, to have their best friend that doesn't know Jesus, and to understand with empathy and compassion and deep understanding that that's a difficult place for anyone to be in. I think as followers of Jesus, it should break our hearts when people close to us don't know him, or even when people in our lives, are resistant towards the gospel and God. I think that's an incredibly heartbreaking place to be. And I think it's our job as youth leaders, as disciple makers, as mentors in their lives to be able to walk students through. And in the same way that we highlighted how Hannah highlighted that evangelism is like playing the long game, discipling students to evangelism is playing the long game, because again, it's the come and see, go and do, come and debrief, let's talk about it model. We just want to continue to encourage you guys to engage with their lives in a way that you actually know their stories beyond what school they go to and what sports they play and what they do for work. But I'm going to throw to Deniel, because this is going to be the hot take. This is where you get out your notes and get ready to tweet and at Deniel here, because
yes.
We're going to have a moment here for Deniel to talk about how to encourage Gen Z to use social media to share or tell the better story. So Deniel, I'm going to give it to you.
Peter, you're such a joker, man. Oh, guys, hey, this is not a hot take, but I truly do believe that in order to help Gen Z get to really be able to help them share their story, we need to meet them where they are. We need to be where they are, and they are on social media. They are constantly posting on every platform talking about story time. Hey, let me write this long blog post on Instagram under a picture of like what my day was like. Let me tweet. Like they're on social media. So my encouragement would be, hey, be with them on social media. If you're not a social media person, I totally understand. But if you don't post anything, it's okay. At least be on social media to see what they're doing, to be able to have conversation about what their day is like. Because I feel like all of it is in between. We don't want it just to be in person, because who they are in person at youth group, at school, on the hockey team, on social media, we want to all be the same person. So if we are with them and guiding them through all circles, then we can help them not only to be one person on social media and one person in person, they can be the same person everywhere and sharing the exact same story everywhere. So I would say, hey, yeah, be on social media to educate yourself on what's happening in their world, but also empower them to share their story about what Jesus is doing in their life on social media. Like, they are so quick to go on TikTok and do a 5-part story time on how the teacher gave them a wrong mark or something happened on Zoom. Why can't they do a 5-part on how Jesus is working in their life? I think if we encourage them to allow Jesus to be a part of their regular day, then it wouldn't be abnormal for them to be talking about it when they're with their friends, when they're with their parents, with their uncles, with their aunties. It wouldn't be abnormal because it's a part of their everyday on social media and in person. But that does bring us to the next point. I know, Peter, you're going to get there, but how allowing them not to keeping students accountable on social media. And we're going to talk about service opportunities in a minute. Peter, you're going to jump there. But I feel like when we're with them on social media, we can keep them accountable for the things they post there also. Because we talk one way on youth night, we talk one way when we're in small group together, but then when they're outside of our care, they are in a whole different world. So when we're part of that world on social media, we can keep them accountable to say, hey, you're talking this way about how God's working in our small group, but then I saw you posting something that didn't really match. Can we talk about that and have a conversation on what that looks like right now on your journey where you're with your relationship with Jesus? A part of helping students share their story is also keeping them accountable to allow them to know that God is actually constantly with you everywhere you go, in person and online. Yeah. So that's my hot take, guys, on social media.
If you guys want the less muted version of his hot take, just email him or direct message him on Instagram or something, because maybe you should host like a Clubhouse talk on the non-muted version of your hot take, because trust me guys, that was the muted softer version of his hot take. But I love what Deniel said. Like, I think here's perhaps the biggest generational gap between what Gen Z live in and even what millennials can live in. Like there was this narrative that like there was this like online world and an in-person world. That separation doesn't exist for Gen Z. It's like this augmented reality, right? Like you are who you are, and not one space is not necessarily less important or less potent than the other. They exist in both. And it's not even like a Venn diagram where there's like a moment or a place that intersects. It's like the whole life is like inaugurated with this digital reality that they live in. And I think like the ability to understand that when Gen Z are on social media, like it's not just a means of entertainment anymore, right? Like maybe that's how your generation viewed it, whether it was entertainment, even like information, but it's not just information or entertainment. It's actually like how they're consuming content, how they're relaying and communicating content, how they're engaging with community. Like people are associating themselves with people across the world and feel more connected to those people than those in their living room because of this online reality. That's a crazy thing to wrap our head around. And I think what Deniel was saying, hey, as youth leaders, we need to look at the social media space, both from an educational and empowerment perspective, empowering our students to tell the story of Jesus on that platform, and also educating ourselves and understanding the world that they live in. And none of us are aiming to be the cultural expert of social media. None of us, unless you are a youth leader and you like are working at Google, none of us are on the cutting edge of all the technology that's coming out. But it's important for us to understand that the primary way on an everyday basis that people are storytelling narratives about their values, their ethics, their morals, their beliefs, their convictions, whatever it is through their own personal social media. And this is how people are interacting. And COVID has only highlighted that, right? In a world where we can't see so many people in person, how do I communicate what I believe in, whether it's the food that I like, the things that I stand for, or the movements or tribes I want to be a part of? It's through social media. And Deniel referenced this, and this is kind of the third avenue we want to go down when it comes to mediums or platforms we want to encourage our students to be telling the better story of Jesus in. But this idea of service opportunities. And in this kind of big umbrella of service opportunities is also the conversation around even this whole social justice movement that we're living in. And I'm going to throw it to Hannah here because I think she's done some cool things with her students and can talk to her context a little bit that we can learn from. But yeah, Hannah, give us a little bit about what it looks like for us as youth leaders to serve alongside our students and helping them tell the better story of Jesus in the way that we live our lives.
Yeah, totally. And Deniel, can I just say, I think you raised such a great point with social media because our students are already telling their stories. They already know how to do that. And I think it's significant that this conversation is about telling the better story, right? So in a world where they're already very comfortable in storytelling, sharing parts of their lives that you would never even maybe share on social media before, how do we leverage that? How do we harness that to not just tell another story on TikTok that you're going to flip through, but tell the better story, tell the best story, right? So I think that's really, really powerful. Something that I've found has been really great for our students in service opportunities in telling this better story is this event that we do here in Atlantic Canada called Title Impact. It's taking on a bit of a different flavor this year because of COVID. They're calling it Undercurrent. But the idea is that you serve together as a youth group and you make community partnerships. So you go into your community and you find the places where help is needed and you bring your students there and you help them. But we're really intentional with our students to say, we're not just helping because this is a nice thing to do. We're not just helping because this is something to take up a week of your summer. But when people ask our students, why are you taking a week off from your job or from doing nothing on vacation to paint a fence or to take care of kids, or to do a massive food drive? They're able to communicate, well, I'm doing this because of Jesus. They're able to share that story of who Jesus is, share the story of how an encounter with Jesus has intersected into their own story. And in a way, it's a safer space for them to be able to try that out because they're with a bunch of other kids who are serving. Maybe they're doing something where they're a little bit distracted, so it's not like they're sitting across from someone one-on-one trying to have a coffee and tell them about Jesus. But while you're fence painting or whatever it is you're doing, you're able to have a chance to kind of share that that story and say, this is why, and this is what sets me apart. I know we've chatted about, there are many different organizations that do wonderful and awesome work, but we're not all doing it for the same reason. And for us, it's this greater story, the story of Jesus and who he is and how he is moved by compassion to enter into these spaces where there might be brokenness and help bring wholeness again. And that has been really significant for my students.
Wow. I love that. I love the idea of like, what's the motive or what's the why driving? Because there's tons of good things happening and great people doing a ton of good things. But the why really is, to Hannah's point, like, as followers of Jesus, who should be the group of people that drop everything in a self-sacrificial way to serve those in need? Followers of Jesus, modeled by the servant Christ, to be able to go, man, this is what I'm seeing. My heart is broken for these needs, and I have the means to meet it. And kind of in the thread of conversation of compassion, I want to throw it to Deniel, because I just think, and this is a big can of worms that we're not trying to, this is a separate conversation. And I think there's another trio having this conversation on this podcast, so you can listen to their, actually don't listen to their episode yet. Listen to our episode, and then once our competition is over, then listen to their episode. But Deniel, talk us through just how important it is as followers of Jesus to help our students engage with the social justice movements that are happening, but through the lens of Christ and as a Christ follower. And I think that's the distinctive that we need to focus on.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I would first say, like, I kind of prefaced it in the last talking about social media, but we have recognized that injustice is all around us. I don't think that's one thing that we debate. We see it. We've seen it all throughout 2020. It's now really in our face, and our students have really been ignited about it. Like, they want to help to do something about it. We see that mostly on social media with students posting either for Blackout Tuesday or posting something on social media. But unfortunately, we see it for only as a trend or a fad, as faded over time. And I think that's what culture has really been teaching our students. But I think one thing that as a church, as student leaders, that we can be encouraging our students to do is also to live it out. Not on social media, not in front of not in front of a crowd, but in our circles. Because I think we recognize that there's injustice in the world, and we ask the questions, hey, what do we need to do? Like how can we do something? And I first think we need to say, hey, first do it within your circle. Like, we recognize that Jesus is for the oppressed. He's for the weak. He is for you. He's for everyone. And when we're talking about how Jesus is working in our students' lives and working through their story, then we need to also recognize that Jesus is for those who need help. And within that of creating your story, understanding how God is working in you, that he's also going to be helping you to want to help those who need help. So I think really just igniting that in our students, by not only modeling that, but also by keeping them accountable. So it's not just a one-day trend that you see on social media. Be like, hey, so like, let's go do a search project together, like Hannah was saying. Let's go out and in your conversations with more students, let's talk about kind of like what it means to actually love, what it means to have to care about what people are going through, what it means to actually show empathy and show compassion, not just on a social media standpoint or on a one-day standpoint, but through every single day, on a daily occurrence. That's, I think, the better way to say it, daily.
Right. I love that. I think, like, again, through the lens of telling the better story, it's like, hey, culture is rightly angered by the injustice and the inequality we see around us. But as followers of Jesus, through the lens of Christ, through this understanding and this truth that people were made in the image of God, we've got even a deeper reason to be angered by the injustice around us, and to allow that to be the motive, as opposed to, man, this is the right thing to do because it's trendy, or this is the right thing to do because other people are doing it. I think a great ability to, or if we can give the gift of our students of like having like a compass that's directed by Christ, as opposed to a compass that's directed by trends, is a beautiful gift, because we want to be a part of discipling a generation that is a part of activating change for decades to come, behind closed doors, in private moments, in conversations, when it's not trendy or when it's no longer the thing to talk about. Because I want to be a part of helping students be a part of lifelong change and living a life of conviction. So I think that's what it is. It's in their own circles. It's on social media. It's in service in the way we live our lives. It's in the cultural moments that we find ourselves in, being able to tell the better story of Christ or the better alternative to what it is the world is offering. We're just recognizing again that in this conversation, there's a billion narratives being told out there. There's a million stories with a million voices. And the idea and the truth that we want to rally behind is we have the better story or the best story, like Hannah said, in Christ. And we want to help Gen Z to be able to do that. So again, do they know how to tell the story of Jesus? To be able to articulate the gospel in a clear way? Do they know how to tell their own story in the intersection of Christ in their lives? And what are these mediums that we should be encouraging our students to be able to tell the story of Jesus or tell the better story in their lives? Any last things, burning things that you guys want to tell our friends before we say our goodbyes and hop off?
Yeah, I just think this has been a great conversation. I think that, the mark of a good story is that it moves people and it transforms them and it changes them. And after you hear a good story, after you experience that story, and for us as Christians, after being part of that story, you're just not the same. And I think that's the thing that transcends the trends. And that is really what we're inviting our students into, as a story of God and what he's doing, but also God and what he's doing in their lives. That's really going to make a difference. Like you said, that's going to leave a legacy.
Yeah, and I would say, hey, if you haven't heard this yet from a student or your youth pastor, you are cool. You are awesome. You are doing work that not every single person can do, and that is shaping the next generation. So just know that you are cool, you are awesome, and that you are loved. And hopefully this podcast, this conversation has helped you even a little bit on what it means to help your students share their story a little bit more. Don't come at me my DMs about my hot take. I'm gonna say that.
Well, on that note, again, we just, with full hearts and grateful hearts, we're just so thankful that all of us have been invited by God to help Gen Z tell the better story of Christ. And so thanks so much for listening. Download, share. I don't know if we're allowed to do this, but maybe other groups have, and so I want to make sure that we do it too. This is there's a low-key competition going on, and it would really boost our ego and pride. And maybe that's not good. I shouldn't have said that. It would really be good for Deniel's heart if you just really shared this a lot, just with all your youth leader friends. And so just help us win the competition. Do it for your boy, Deniel. But thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you guys next time.
Well, as Peter said, there is a little bit of a competition, Sid, going between some of our friends. We've got a number of young youth workers who are bringing some great content over the next couple of weeks. And so we're looking forward to hearing from them and their wisdom as they think strategically about how to help us do a better job as small group leaders on the ground doing our youth ministry. So looking forward to that. But before we go today, we want to highlight our other sponsor today. We've got Trinity Western University, who are a big help. We love the work that we get to do with Trinity Western and the way that they make these types of resources possible.
Yeah, Jared, I love Trinity Western University for a few reasons. Number one, they do a great job of preparing you for your vocation. So they're really, really good at that. And they're thinking about how to live as a follower of Christ as you engage whatever vocation it is you're involved in. So I love that. Number two, I love how they're committed to the spiritual formation of their students. And so I've had students from my youth ministry end up at Trinity, and it's just been great to see what God's been doing in their lives in that context of community. And then finally, they're really serious about leadership development. And so they want to prepare you to not simply engage the workforce, but be a leader in the workforce, to be a culture shaper. And those aren't just words that we use. We see it all the time. My wife has a number of Trinity students that work at her camp in the summer, and they are consistently some of our best leaders that we have. And so I'm really thankful for the work Trinity does. And Jer, it is such an honor for us to partner with Trinity Western University. So if you're looking, or if you have students who are looking for a post-secondary option, please make sure you send them to the Trinity Western University website. And if you'd like, we could connect you with some of their advisors, and would love to help make that happen.
Absolutely. If you've got any thoughts, concerns, or ideas about future episodes for the Youth Ministry Team podcast, you can head to our website. The link is in the show notes, youthministry.team. And then I guess we just got to say we'll see you next week.
Yeah, see you next week, everybody.